In this video, we're going to talk about how to factor by grouping. So you'll see in your notes that the first thing you have to do is create groups. You usually do that by grouping the first two terms together and the last two. And then you factor out the greatest common factor from each of the two groups. And then if the factors inside the parentheses are not the same, then you need to rearrange it so that when you do factor it, you get the same one in the parentheses. And we will have some of those that we'll have to do that with. But for this first one here, we don't. So I'm just going to factor these groups. Usually, again, it's the first two and the last two. So for this first one, I have x cubed minus 5x squared plus 3x minus 15. Well, again, I usually group these first two and then these second two. So what's common between those first two is an x squared. That's the highest x power in this first part. So if I take out an x squared, x cubed divided by x squared leaves me with an x, and 5x squared divided by an x squared leaves me with a negative 5. I'll put my plus sign in the middle there still. And now I have to think about what's common between 3x and 15. Well, that would be 3. So 3x divided by 3 leaves me with an x, and negative 15 divided by 3 is negative 5. Now, these two are the same, so I've factored it correctly, and now I can group them. So these two go together, which gives me x minus 5. And then the other two, the x squared plus 3, are also going to be grouped together now. So now if I multiply this back through, you will get the same thing, because this is our equivalent factored form. Let's try another one. I'll jump down to number 3 here. Again, usually we can group them by the first two and the next two. So I'll try that first. So I need to look at what's common. And 3x cubed minus 6x squared. Well, I know I can take out a 3 because these both have a factor of 3 in them. And then this highest power I can take out is this x squared here. If I take that out, 3x cubed divided by 3x squared is just an x. And then negative 6x squared divided by 3x squared is a negative 2. And then this last part, 15x minus 30. Well, a common factor between 15 and 30, the biggest one, is 15. So I take out a positive 15. 15x divided by 15 is x, and negative 30 divided by 15 is negative 2. Now, again, I see I've done it correctly. So I have x minus 2 as the first factor, and 3x squared plus 15 as the second factor. And again, those are equivalent. If I go back through and multiply, x times 3x squared gives me 3x cubed. That gives me 15x. That gives me negative 6x squared. And those last two give me negative 30, which is in fact the same as what I started with. So this is my factored equivalent form. Number 6, over here, we have x squared minus 6yz plus 2xy minus 3xz. So I'm going to start by trying to factor that. Well, if you look at these first two and these next two, you'll see that this first one, there's nothing in common. This has an x, and that's all there is to it. The second part has a y and a z, and there's definitely no x that I could factor out, so none of these have anything in common. This one does, but again, this one doesn't. So if I can't factor anything out, then that's not the correct way, and I need to reorder it and group it differently. So to group it differently, this is just by trial and error, but we can also kind of see if this is an x by itself, I probably need this one or this one, because that also has an x in it that I could factor out. I'll just try this first one here. I'll put the x squared with the 2xy, and then carry over the negative 6yz minus 3xz. Now I'll try factoring. So these two here, the biggest factor I have is x. So x squared divided by x is just x. And then 2xy, if I take out an x, that leaves me with 2y. Minus these next two, I have a number in common as well, so I could take out a 3, my biggest number. And then z can come out also, because they both have z's here. Well, negative 6yz divided by negative 3z leaves me with a positive 2y. and minus 3xz divided by minus 3z leaves me with a positive x. These are, in fact, the same. You would just have to rearrange this one or this one, but they will stay the same. So I write down x plus 2y as my first factor, and x minus 3z as my next. And again, if you want to check that, go ahead and multiply it, and you will see that you get the same thing. So there's my equivalent form. We'll do one more, number 8 over here. If I look at number 8, if I look at the same thing by factoring these two, grouping them, this has 6tx plus r. Well, none of those are the same. Now this next two also has nothing in common. There's a t, an r, and an x. So there's nothing I can factor out between that. So I'll just try regrouping again. This has a t here, so let's try pairing it with this 3t over here. And then I'll put the r with the other 2rx. So sometimes it's easy to regroup because you can just see which one has the same factors and then try it. And if it doesn't work, well, try it again. Here, I'm going to factor out a 3t because a number that's common in between 6 and 3 is 3, and then I can take out a t as well. If I do that, 6tx divided by 3t is going to give me 2x. And take out a 3t divided by 3t is a negative 1. And here I can take out an r that's common, so that leaves me with 1 minus 2x. Now here's the problem. Those aren't the same. But if I know my arithmetic skills, I know that this is a positive 1. I have a negative 1 here, a negative 2x, and a positive 2x. The easiest way to turn something the opposite of what I want is to multiply it by a negative. So I'm going to leave this first one here, but instead of taking out a positive r, I'm going to make it a negative r. So now if I take a negative r out of this positive r, that turns this into a negative 1, and that'll turn this negative 2x into a positive 2x. Now I have 2x minus 1, and this, just like in number 6, is written backwards, but it's still the same thing. So now I have 2x minus 1 and 3t minus r. And again, if you multiply that back through, you will see that that's the equivalent form. So now you guys try 2, 4, 5, and 7.